I spent weeks in the hospital fighting for my life, and not one person from my family came to see me. Not my mother. Not my father. Not my sister. A month later, my mother texted me, "We demand $25,000 for your sister's dream wedding." I sent her one penny and wrote back, "Have fun." A few hours later, my entire world exploded, and I realized my family's betrayal ran far deeper than just ignoring me. They had actively orchestrated my isolation. And the moment I found out, I knew exactly how I was going to tear their pristine, fake reality to the ground. My name is Marin. I am 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the invisible foundation my family comfortably walked all over. I work as a commercial real estate appraiser. It means I spend 70 hours a week analyzing spreadsheets, driving to abandoned lots, and surviving in a high-pressure corporate environment. I make a good living, over $120,000 a year. But I earned every single dime of it with my own blood, sweat, and panic attacks. The nightmare started 6 weeks ago on a freezing Tuesday afternoon. I was out at a desolate industrial park, wearing my heavy boots and a winter coat, inspecting a massive warehouse that had been abandoned for a decade. The wind was howling, rattling the loose sheet metal on the roof. I had been feeling off all morning, just a dull ache in my lower right side. I pushed through it because that is what I do. I am Marin. I handle things. I do not complain. But as I was walking across the cracked asphalt of the empty parking lot, the dull ache suddenly erupted into a blinding, white-hot agony. It felt like someone had driven a jagged hunting knife directly into my abdomen and twisted it. I gasped, the cold air burning my throat, and my knees simply gave out. I hit the frozen ground hard. The gravel tore through my jeans and scraped my skin, but I could not even feel it over the inferno in my stomach. My appendix had ruptured. I did not know it at the time, but toxic bacteria were already flooding my system, triggering severe sepsis. My body was going into shock. I fumbled for my phone with numb, shaking fingers. I dialed emergency services. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, her voice a distant echo over the roaring in my ears, until I heard the wail of the ambulance sirens. The paramedics rushed over. They loaded me onto a stretcher, and the next thing I remember is the blinding fluorescent lights of the ambulance ceiling and the frantic beeping of the monitors. One of the paramedics, a kind man with kind eyes, looked down at me and said, "Your blood pressure is dropping dangerously low. We need to get you into emergency surgery the second we hit the hospital doors. Is there anyone you need to call?" I nodded weakly. My hands were trembling so violently I could not hold the phone, so the paramedic held it for me. I dialed my mother, Cressida. It rang 3 times. Finally, she picked up. I could hear the faint sound of classical music in the background and the clinking of silverware. "Mom," I gasped out, my voice cracking, sounding like a terrified little girl instead of a successful corporate appraiser. "I am in an ambulance." I collapsed. "They are taking me into emergency surgery right now. They said the infection is bad. I am really scared." There was a pause on the line. I waited for the panic. I waited for her to ask which hospital. I waited for her to say she was on her way. Instead, I heard the rustle of a magazine page turning. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Marin," Cressida sighed. Her tone was dripping with that familiar, exhausted annoyance she always reserved just for me. "You always have to make such a dramatic production out of everything. We're right in the middle of picking out table linens for Sloane's engagement dinner. Just text me when you are out of surgery and let me know you are fine." Before I could process the words, the line went dead. She hung up on me. My mother hung up on her daughter, who was bleeding internally and slipping into septic shock. The paramedic staring down at me looked horrified. He slowly pulled the phone away. I closed my eyes as a tear slid down my temple, mixing with the dirt on my face. The pain in my stomach was excruciating, but the hollow ache in my chest was so much worse. The ambulance swerved into the emergency bay. Doors flew open. Voices shouted medical jargon I did not understand. Hands grabbed my stretcher, rushing me through the sterile white hallways. I had to sign the surgical consent forms with a pen that slipped between my muddy, blood-stained fingers. The surgeon told me point-blank that I was facing a severe risk of mortality if they did not operate immediately. The anesthesia hit my veins like liquid ice. As the world faded to black, my last conscious thought was wondering if anyone would even come to my funeral, or if it would conflict with my sister's wedding schedule. When I woke up, my throat was raw from the breathing tube. The room was dim, the silence broken only by the rhythmic hissing of the oxygen machine and the steady beep of my heart monitor. I blinked the heavy sleep from my eyes and slowly turned my head toward the door. I expected to see a worried face. I expected to see my father pacing or my mother looking guilty. But there was nothing. The sterile blue guest chair next to my bed was completely, utterly empty. And little did I know, that chair would remain empty for a very long time. What kind of family just leaves you there? 31 days. I want you to really process that time frame. 31 days trapped in a hospital bed. That is over 400 hours of staring at the same water stain on the ceiling tiles. 400 hours of nurses drawing blood, changing 4 bags, and asking me about my pain levels at 3 in the morning. 400 hours of waiting for a familiar face to walk through that heavy wooden door. I was introduced to Nurse Jovi on day 2. She was a loud, cheerful woman with warm hands and a laugh that filled up the corners of my bleak room. When she came in to check my vitals, she looked around the empty room, her brow furrowing slightly. She did not say anything then, but I saw the pity in her eyes. I hated that pity. It tasted like ashes in my mouth. As the days dragged on, the silence in my room became a physical weight. My recovery was brutal. The sepsis had wreaked havoc on my organs, requiring a second, highly dangerous procedure on day 8 to clear out a secondary infection. I was running violent fevers that soaked my hospital gown. I was hallucinating from the pain medication. And through it all, I was entirely alone. Lying in that bed, with nothing but the steady drip of the 4 for company, my mind wandered into what I call the Museum of Pain. It was a mental collection of every time my family had shown me exactly how little I mattered. I am a logical person. I deal with appraisals and numbers. Numbers do not lie. And the numbers of my childhood painted a very clear picture of my worth compared to my younger sister, Sloane. Exhibit A was my first car. When I turned 19, I needed a way to get to my classes and my 2 part-time jobs. I saved up $1,500 in crumpled bills and bought a rusted, terrible little sedan from a mechanic down the street. The heater did not work, and it smelled faintly of wet dog. When I proudly showed it to my parents, my father Evander just frowned and told me not to park it in the driveway because it was leaking oil on his pristine concrete. 1 month later, Sloane got her driver's license. My parents surprised her with a brand new, $35,000 SUV with a giant red bow on the hood. When I asked why, my mother simply said, "Sloane is delicate, Marin. She cannot be driving around in some dangerous junk heap. You're tough. You can handle it." Exhibit B was my college graduation. I had busted my back to graduate top of my class with a degree in finance. I had secured a high-paying job before I even walked across the stage. I bought my parents premium tickets for the ceremony. I waited for them in my cap and gown for 2 hours. They never showed up. When I called them from the campus quad, crying, my mother told me they had to go to a local theater because Sloane was auditioning for a background role in a community play. Sloane needed moral support, Cressida had said. "You are just walking across the stage, Marin. You do not need us there." Exhibit C was the ultimate betrayal of trust. 2 years ago, I had an emergency envelope hidden in my apartment with $800 in cash. It was for extreme emergencies. Sloane had visited me one weekend, crying about how stressed she was. A week later, my envelope was empty. I confronted her, and she shamelessly admitted she took it to buy a designer handbag she saw on social media because she needed a pick-me-up. Furious, I went to our parents. My father Evander looked at me and shrugged. "Come on, Marin," he said. "She is your little sister. You make so much money now. Why are you nickel and diming her over a purse? Be the bigger person." I was always the bigger person. The tough one. The invisible foundation. Have you ever sat in a room full of your own relatives and felt like you were the only stranger there? Have you ever realized that your value to the people who share your blood is entirely conditional on what you can provide for them? If you know exactly what that feels like, Please leave a comment down below because sometimes I feel like I am going crazy. I snapped out of my memories as my phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was day 12 of my hospitalization. I had just survived my second surgery. I was exhausted, aching, and so incredibly lonely I felt like I was hollowed out inside. I weakly reached for the phone. The screen lit up. One new text message from Sloan. My heart actually skipped a beat. For a fleeting, pathetic second, the little girl inside me hoped. I hoped she was checking on me. I hoped she was coming to visit. I unlocked the screen. I read the message. And my breath simply caught in my throat. What I saw next made me realize I was truly an orphan with living parents. The text from Sloan read, "Hey, did you leave my $200 AirPods at your place? I cannot find them, and I cannot work out without my gym playlist. Let me know ASAP." I stared at the screen. My vision blurred, not from the heavy painkillers, but from a sudden, blinding rush of tears. I was hooked up to a ventilator 2 days ago. I was fighting an infection that was actively trying to shut down my kidneys. And my sister was annoyed because she could not listen to her gym playlist. I did not respond. I could not. I just let the phone drop onto the sterile white blanket and stared at the ceiling until the tears stopped falling. The ironic contrast of my situation was staggering. While my blood relatives were worried about wireless headphones, strangers were showing me more humanity than I had seen in years. Nurse Jovi came in later that afternoon. She took one look at my red, puffy eyes, and without saying a word, she pulled a little plastic cup out of her pocket. It was pomegranate jello. She had bought it from the downstairs cafeteria with her own money because she remembered me mumbling about it in my sleep after my second surgery. "Honey, somebody has to spoil you a little bit," Jovi said softly, patting my hand. Later that evening, she brought a basin of warm water and gently washed my hair, untangling the knots that had formed from sweating through my fevers. A stranger, a woman who was paid to do a job, went out of her way to make me feel human. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my father, Evander. He texted, "Hey Marin, what is the new password for the Netflix account?" It logged me out on the living room TV. Not, "How are you?" Not, "Are you in pain?" Just give me the password so I can watch my shows. But the absolute breaking point came on day 14. I was scrolling aimlessly through Instagram to distract myself from the agonizing ache in my stitches. I saw a news story posted by Talia. Talia is one of Sloane's best friends and a bridesmaid in her upcoming wedding. I tapped the circle. The video showed a beautiful, sunlit vineyard. The camera panned around a large oak table covered in expensive wine glasses, charcuterie boards, and laughing faces. There was my mother, Cressida, throwing her head back in a laugh. There was my father, Evander, holding up a glass of red wine. And there was Sloane, beaming into the camera, looking absolutely radiant. The caption read, "Amazing wine tasting weekend with the best future in-laws." I looked at the timestamp. The video was taken 2 days ago. Right around the exact hour I was being wheeled into the operating room for the second time, my surgeon unsure if I was going to make it out. My family was sipping Merlot and eating artisan cheese. Something broke inside me right then. It was not a loud, dramatic shatter. It was a quiet, final snap. The last thread of hope I had been desperately clinging to simply dissolved. I stopped crying. I stopped waiting for the door to open. I stopped checking my phone for visitors. I built a fortress of pure, cold ice around my heart. On day 31, the doctor finally cleared me for discharge. I was incredibly weak. I had lost 15 pounds I could not afford to lose. My clothes hung off my frame like rags on a scarecrow. The nurse wheeled me down to the lobby. "Is your family here to pick you up, sweetheart?" The discharge nurse asked kindly. "No," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of any emotion. "I am taking an Uber." I ordered the ride. I tipped the driver an extra $20 to help me up the stairs to my apartment because my legs were trembling so badly I thought I would fall. I unlocked my door and pushed it open. The air inside was stale and stuffy. A thick layer of dust coated every surface. A massive pile of mail had been shoved through the slot, forming a paper mountain of bills and junk flyers on the floor. But the thing that hurt the most were my plants. I loved my houseplants. They were vibrant, green, and full of life. Now, they were brown, shriveled, and completely dead. They had withered away from neglect, much like my relationship with my family. I collapsed onto my living room floor, surrounded by dead leaves and unopened mail. I did not even have the strength to crawl to my bedroom. I lay there on the hardwood floor, staring at the ceiling, and made a silent vow. I promised myself I would never, ever let them make me feel this small again. I promised myself that the next time they reached out to use me, they would find a brick wall. It took me a full month of physical therapy, relying on grocery deliveries, and sheer stubborn willpower to regain my strength. Exactly 30 days after I came home from the hospital, I finally felt like myself again. I had cooked my first real meal and was sitting at my dining table. And then, the silence of my apartment was shattered. My phone lit up. A text from my mother. It was the first communication I had received from her since I was in the ambulance. I picked it up, expecting some half-hearted apology. But when I read the massive number glaring back at me on the screen, I realized the war had just begun. The text message from Cressida stared back at me, glowing ominously in the dim light of my dining room. I read it once. I rubbed my eyes, thinking my vision was still failing me. I read it twice. I read it a third time, and then a dry, humorless laugh erupted from my chest. It echoed off the walls of my quiet apartment. "Hi, sweetie," the text read. "So, exciting news. Sloane and Orson are finalizing the wedding details for October. We found the most breathtaking custom designer dress for her, and she absolutely has to have the imported orchid ceiling installation for the reception. It is going to be spectacular. But the budget is stretched tight, and we need $25,000 to cover these final touches. We know your career is going so well right now. Family helps family, Marin. Transfer the funds to my account by Friday. Love you." I sat back in my chair, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. $25,000. For a dress she would wear once and a ceiling made of flowers that would rot in a week. They were demanding $25,000 from the daughter they had completely abandoned. The daughter who had nearly died while they were sipping expensive wine. They did not ask how my recovery was going. They did not ask if I was back at work. They did not ask if I was even alive. They just held out their hands, expecting me to fill them with cash. Because that was my only designated role in this family. I was not a daughter. I was not a sister. I was an ATM machine that dispensed money whenever the golden child threw a tantrum. I thought about the phrase she used. Family helps family. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of those 3 words made my blood boil. Where was this family when I was signing my own surgical consent forms with bloody hands? Where was this family when I was begging the nurses for ice chips because my throat was on fire? As if the universe had a dark sense of humor, my mail carrier had dropped off a thick envelope from the hospital billing department earlier that afternoon. I had left it on the table, dreading opening it. Now, feeling reckless, I tore the envelope open. I unfolded the itemized statement. The total balance before my insurance adjustments was a staggering $85,000. Even with my premium corporate health insurance, my out-of-pocket maximum meant I owed thousands of dollars just for the privilege of not dying. I stared at the medical bill on the left and the text demanding $25,000 on the right. The contrast was sickening. My struggle for survival versus her luxurious vanity. A younger, weaker version of me would have cried. A younger Marin would have typed out a long, emotional paragraph begging them to understand my pain, explaining my medical debt, and pleading for an apology. But that Marin had died on an operating table 6 weeks ago. The woman sitting in the chair now was a seasoned corporate appraiser who knew how to spot a bad investment. And this family was the worst investment of my life. I did not owe them an explanation. Explanations are for people who care enough to listen. They only cared about my wallet. So, I decided to speak their language. I decided to make a transaction. I opened my banking application on my phone. I navigated to the transfer section. I selected my mother's saved account information. I tapped the amount field. I did not type 25,000. I typed 0.01. 1 single penny. I scrolled down to the memo line attached to the transfer. I could have written a curse word. I could have written a lengthy insult. But true contempt does not need paragraphs. True contempt is brief. I typed 2 words. Have fun. I hit confirm. The little loading circle spun for a second, and then a green checkmark appeared. Transfer successful. I placed my phone face down on the table, picked up my fork, and took a bite of my dinner. It was the best meal I had eaten in months. I knew the exact sequence of events that would follow. Cressida would see the bank notification. She would assume I sent the full amount. She would eagerly open the app, her eyes gleaming with greed, only to see a single, solitary penny sitting in her account with my mocking message attached to it. I did not have to wait long. Exactly 3 minutes after the transfer went through, the peace of my evening was shattered. My phone began to vibrate violently against the wooden table. It was not a text. It was a phone call. And the caller ID flashing on the screen was not my mother, and it was not Sloan. It was the man who had not bothered to call me once during my 31 days in the hospital. My father, Evander. I watched my phone dance across the table as Evander called. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, a barrage of text messages hit my phone like a machine gun. My lock screen lit up with notifications. Sloan was the first to strike. 1 penny? Are you insane? Do you know how humiliating this is? Mom showed Orson the transfer notification while we were having dinner. You made me look like an idiot in front of my future husband. You have always been jealous of me because I am getting married first. You are trying to ruin the happiest time of my life because you are a miserable, bitter person. I read the text and smiled a cold, hard smile. Notice the wording. Not a single ounce of concern for why I might be upset. Just pure, unadulterated narcissism. Her only concern was that I made her look bad in front of her rich fiancé, Orson. Then came the flying monkeys. Aunt Maura, the family gossip, sent me a message in all capital letters. How dare you disrespect your mother like this? Your sister deserves a beautiful wedding. You are tearing this family apart. Shame on you, Marin. My phone vibrated again. Another call from Evander. This time, I decided to answer. I tapped the green button and lifted the phone to my ear, remaining completely silent. Marin, what on earth is wrong with you? Evander's voice sparked through the speaker. He was using his stern, condescending tone, the one he used when I was a teenager who stayed out past curfew. Your mother is in the living room having a panic attack. Sloan is crying in the bathroom. You sent them 1 penny? Are you trying to be funny? Because no one is laughing. I took a slow, deep breath. I am not trying to be funny, Dad, I said, my voice eerily calm. I am giving you exactly what you earned. What are you talking about? He demanded, frustration leaking into his voice. We asked for a simple favor. Your sister needs this. We know you have the money, Marin. Stop being so selfish and dramatic. Dramatic? The word tasted like poison. Let me ask you a question, Dad. Do you know that I almost died on the operating table during my 2nd surgery? Do you even know what day I was discharged? There was a heavy, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. The background noise of the television at his house suddenly seemed very loud. Well, he stammered, losing his aggressive edge. We knew you were in the hospital, obviously. But you were fine. The doctors had it under control. We were just incredibly busy with the wedding planning, Marin. You have to understand, there are deposits to pay, caterers to meet. You cannot expect the world to stop turning just because you are in a hospital bed. I closed my eyes. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. I was alone in a hospital for 31 days, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. 31 days. I had 2 major surgeries. I survived sepsis. I ate hospital food alone. I cried myself to sleep alone. And I watched other patients have visitors every single day. The only person who cared if I lived or died was a nurse I had never met before. And you want to tell me you were too busy tasting wine and picking out table linens to send 1 text message? Marin, be reasonable, he started. No, I cut him off sharply. The time for reasonable is over. You value me exactly as much as an ATM. So, consider my account closed. That 1 penny is the exact value of the effort you put into my survival. Keep it. Buy a fraction of an orchid with it. Do not ever call me asking for money again." I ended the call before he could formulate another excuse. I blocked his number. I blocked Sloane's number. I blocked my mother and Aunt Maura. I sat back and watched the silence return to my apartment. If you were in my shoes in that exact moment, reading those incredibly toxic, manipulative messages from the people who were supposed to protect you, what would you do? Would you cave to the pressure and apologize, or would you fight back and burn the bridge? Let me know in the comments below. I felt a strange sense of finality. I thought it was over. I thought the worst of it was behind me and I could finally move on with my life and heal in peace. But I was so terribly wrong. The rabbit hole of my family's toxicity went much, much deeper than simple neglect. At exactly 9 o'clock that evening, a sharp knock echoed through my apartment. I tensed up. I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. It was not my angry father or my hysterical mother. It was my cousin, Blythe. Blythe was the one person in our extended family who possessed an actual moral compass. She was smart, sharp, and did not put up with my mother's theatrics. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. Blythe stood in the hallway holding a large thermos of homemade chicken noodle soup. But it was not the soup that caught my attention. It was the look on her face. She looked furious, sympathetic, and anxious all at once. In her free hand, she gripped her smartphone, the screen glowing brightly in the dim hallway. "Marin," Blythe said, her voice trembling slightly with suppressed anger. "Can I come in? There is something you need to see. Something your mother has been hiding from you." I stepped aside, a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. Blythe walked into my living room, set the soup on the counter, and handed me her phone. "Read this," she said. "Read exactly what your mother has been telling the family for the last 2 months." I took Blythe's phone. The screen displayed a massive group chat on a messaging app. The group was titled Sloane's Big Day, and it had nearly 40 participants, aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. It was the same group chat my mother had quietly removed me from 2 years ago after an argument we had about holiday dinner arrangements. I scrolled up to a date 6 weeks ago, the exact day I was admitted to the hospital. There was a message from my mother, Cressida. "Hi everyone. Just a quick update. Marin had a little stomach bug and is in the hospital for some routine checks. Nothing serious at all. However, she was very explicit that she wants absolute privacy. She specifically asked that no one visit her or text her because it stresses her out. She just wants to sleep it off. I will let you know when she is home. Now, back to the florist options." My blood ran cold. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath my feet. I scrolled down further. A week later, during my second, life-threatening surgery, my uncle Declan had asked, "Is Marin doing all right? Haven't heard from her." Cressida responded, "Oh, she is totally fine. Just being stubborn and enjoying her vacation from work. She yelled at me on the phone yesterday for checking in, so I am just giving her the space she demanded. She is so fiercely independent, you know how she is. Anyway, who prefers salmon over steak for the rehearsal dinner?" I felt physically sick. My mother had not just neglected me. She had actively, maliciously constructed an elaborate narrative to ensure that no one else would check on me either. She took my agonizing isolation and weaponized it, painting herself as the respectful mother giving her difficult daughter space, while portraying me as a cold, antisocial brat who pushed family away. She had built a firewall of lies around my hospital bed so she could plan a party without any guilt or awkward questions from the relatives. Blythe watched my face turn pale. "It gets worse, Marin," she said quietly. "Do you know why they are suddenly so desperate for $25,000? Because Sloane is spoiled and wants a flower ceiling?" I guessed, my voice raspy. Blythe shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips. "No, because they are broke, Marin. Completely, utterly drowning in debt." I looked at her, stunned. "What?" "Dad has a good job." "He did," Blythe corrected. "But you know Orson's family, right? Old money. Generational wealth. When Sloane started dating him, she felt insecure. So she lied. She told Orson and his parents that our family was incredibly wealthy too. Real estate tycoons, she called your parents. To keep up the facade, Uncle Evander and Aunt Cressida have been taking out massive loans and maxing out secret credit cards to pay for luxury vacations, country club memberships, and designer clothes. Blythe tapped the screen of her phone. This $25,000 isn't just for a dress. It is a desperate attempt to cover the final vendor payments because their credit lines are tapped out. Orson's family offered to pay for the whole wedding, but Sloane refused to let them, claiming her wealthy father insisted on paying for his daughter's big day. If they cannot produce the money for these final bills, the vendors will cancel, Orson's family will find out they are broke liars, and the entire house of cards comes crashing down. The revelation hit me like a freight train. It all made sickening sense now. The extreme panic over my one-penny transfer. The immediate vitriol. I was not just ruining a dress purchase, I was threatening to expose their entire fraudulent existence. My success, my hard-earned money, was supposed to be their bailout fund. They left me to die, and then expected me to finance their delusions of grandeur. Any lingering trace of sorrow or longing for a loving family evaporated from my soul in that exact moment. The sadness was completely gone, replaced by a crystalline, razor-sharp focus. I looked at the group chat again. I saw the names of all the aunts and uncles who had been deceived. I saw the names of Orson's parents, whom my mother had eagerly added to the chat to show off her fake perfect family. I handed the phone back to Blythe. My hands were no longer shaking. I felt a terrifying, absolute calm wash over me. "Marin?" Blythe asked tentatively. "What are you going to do?" I walked over to my filing cabinet in the corner of the living room. I pulled open the heavy metal drawer. Inside was a thick manila folder containing every single piece of medical documentation from my 31-day stay. Surgical reports. Sepsis diagnoses. The $85,000 itemized bill. I pulled the folder out and dropped it onto the dining table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Blythe," I said, looking my cousin dead in the eyes. "I need you to do me a massive favor. Tomorrow is Saturday. Everyone will be home, relaxing, probably looking at their phones. I want you to add me back into that group chat." Blythe's eyes widened. She looked at the folder, then back at me. A slow, wicked grin began to spread across her face. "What time?" she asked. "Make it exactly 6 p.m., I said, feeling a cold smile touch my own lips. I am going to give them the wedding gift they truly deserve. The unvarnished, undisputed truth. If you are enjoying this story and want to see exactly how Marin burns this fake family dynamic to the ground, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below with the name of the city you are watching from. Every comment helps push this video to more people who need to hear it. Thank you so much for your support. I woke up on Saturday morning with a clarity I had not felt in 29 years. For my entire life, my mind had been clouded by the persistent, nagging guilt that maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was not lovable enough. Maybe I was too demanding. Maybe my family's constant dismissal of my achievements and my feelings was somehow my own fault. But looking at that group chat the night before had burned the fog away entirely. I was not the problem. I was the prey. And today, the prey was going to bite back. I dragged my heavy, corporate-grade scanner from my home office closet and set it up on the dining table. I brewed a massive pot of dark roast coffee. I did not eat breakfast. My stomach was a tight knot of anticipation and cold, calculated rage. I opened the thick manila folder of my medical records and laid the papers out on the table like a general mapping out a battlefield. I needed this to be airtight. In a family built on manipulation and gaslighting, words mean nothing. My mother, Cressida, was a master at twisting conversations, crying on demand, and playing the victim. If I just went into that group chat and yelled at them, she would immediately spin it. She would tell everyone I was having a mental breakdown from the anesthesia. She would say I was acting erratic and jealous of my sister's upcoming wedding. No, I could not just tell them what happened. I had to show them undeniable, physical proof. I took the first document. It was the emergency room admission form. The bright red stamp at the top read, "Severe sepsis, critical condition." The date was clearly visible. I ran it through the scanner. Next was the surgical report from my second, high-risk procedure, detailing the near-fatal drop in my blood pressure. I scanned it. Then came the piece de resistance. The itemized hospital bill. $85,000. I scanned all 4 pages of it. As the scanner hummed and whirred, feeding the devastating truth into my computer as PDF files, I decided to do a little more digging. Something had been bothering me since Blythe showed me the group chat. If my parents were so broke that they were begging me for $25,000, how were they managing their everyday finances during my hospitalization? I logged into my online portal for our shared family cellular plan. I had stayed on their plan and simply paid them my portion every month out of convenience. I pulled up the call logs for the month I was in the hospital. I was looking for the dates my mother had texted the group chat saying I was fine. I wanted to see who she was actually calling. I scrolled down to day 8, the day of my second surgery, the day my surgeon told me I might not wake up. My eyes locked onto a number, a 1-800 number that had been dialed from my mother's phone at 2 in the afternoon, exactly while I was under the knife. I copy and pasted the number into a search engine. The result popped up instantly. It was the customer service line for my supplemental health insurance provider. The secondary policy my parents had taken out on me when I was in college, which I had simply taken over the premiums for but never bothered to change the primary account holder name. My heart began to pound against my ribs. A sickening suspicion crawled up my throat. I picked up my phone and dialed the insurance provider. I navigated the automated menus and finally got a representative on the line. I provided my social security number and asked for the status of my supplemental policy. "I am sorry, ma'am," the representative said, her voice cheerfully oblivious to the bomb she was about to drop on my life. That policy was canceled by the primary account holder, Cressida, 6 weeks ago. She stated the policy was no longer needed and requested a prorated refund of the annual premium. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. "When exactly was it canceled?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Let me check the notes," the representative said. Here it is. On the 8th of last month. Around 2:15 in the afternoon." "Thank you," I said, and hung up the phone. I sat there in the silent apartment, unable to move. While I was bleeding on an operating table, fighting a raging infection, my mother had called my insurance company to cancel my safety net. Why? So she could get a refund check. A check for perhaps $800. She sold my financial security during the most vulnerable moment of my life for $800, probably to pay for a deposit on a florist or a cake tasting for Sloane's wedding. It was a level of depravity I could not fully comprehend. It was not just neglect anymore. It was active sabotage. The doorbell rang, jolting me out of my dark spiral. I walked over and opened it. It was my boyfriend, Hayes. We had been dating for about 8 months before I got sick. He had been out of the country on a major work assignment during my hospitalization, but he had called me every single night, staying on the phone while I cried from the pain. Since he got back, he had been my absolute rock. Hayes took one look at my face and the spread of papers on the dining table. He walked in, locked the door behind him, and wrapped his arms around me. I leaned into his chest, letting out a long, shuddering breath. I told him everything. I told him about the group chat, the lies, the fake wealth, and the canceled insurance policy. Hayes is a calm, patient man. But as I spoke, I felt his jaw clench. His arms tightened around me. When I finished, he pulled back and looked at the stack of scanned documents. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked softly. "Once you drop this bomb, Marin, there is no going back. It will completely obliterate your family. You will likely never speak to your parents or your sister again." I looked at the $85,000 bill. I thought about the empty chair in my hospital room. I thought about my mother cashing a refund check while I was on a ventilator. "I do not have a family, Hayes," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I just have a group of people who share my DNA and use me as a human shield against their own failures. I am not burning a bridge. I am burning a torture chamber." Hayes nodded slowly. He reached out and tapped the keyboard, looking at the PDF files I had meticulously renamed. Evidence 1 admission. Evidence 2 the sepsis. Evidence 3 the bill. Evidence for the canceled insurance. Do not pity them, Marin, Hayes said, his eyes fierce and protective. Because they have never, not for one single second, pitied you. Do exactly what you need to do. I spent the rest of the afternoon drafting the message. I wrote it, deleted it, and rewrote it 20 times. I did not want to sound emotional. I did not want to sound hysterical. I wanted to sound like the ruthless, highly trained corporate appraiser that I was. I was delivering a final audit on my family's morality, and they were officially bankrupt. By 5:30 in the afternoon, the message was perfect. I saved the text in a note app on my phone. I synced the PDF files and the screenshot of the insurance cancellation record to my mobile device. I sat on the couch, my phone resting in the palm of my hand, watching the digital clock on the wall tick closer and closer to the hour. 5:55. 5:58. 5:59. At exactly 6 o'clock, a notification popped up at the top of my screen. Blythe has added you to the group. Sloane's big day. I took a deep breath. The artillery was loaded. It was time to pull the trigger. The moment I entered the group chat, my phone immediately started loading weeks and weeks of backlogged messages. The sheer volume of notifications made my phone freeze for a split second. When the screen finally caught up, I could see the live conversation happening right at that very moment. Aunt Maura had just sent a picture of a massive, towering wedding cake covered in gold flakes. "What do we think of the spun sugar details?" she asked. Cressida, my mother, replied instantly. "Oh, it is absolute perfection, Maura. Sloane is going to look like absolute royalty standing next to it. Orson's parents are going to be so impressed. We are sparing absolutely no expense for our baby girl." I scrolled through the participant list at the top of the chat to verify who exactly was witnessing this delusion. There were 38 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins from both sides of the family. And right there, sitting prominently in the participant list, were two specific phone numbers I recognized from Sloane's engagement party invitations. Arthur and Helen. Orson's parents. My mother had actually added her future wealthy in-laws to a family group chat to show off her fake, affluent lifestyle and her supposed dedication to her daughter. It was the most arrogant, hubristic move she could have possibly made. And it was going to be her absolute undoing. I did not wait for anyone to notice I had been added. If I waited, Cressida might panic and try to remove me or spam the chat to push my messages out of view. Speed and precision were my only allies now. I opened my notes application. I copied the massive block of text I had spent hours refining. I switched back to the group chat. I pasted the text into the message bar. I hit send. Before anyone could even read the first paragraph, I opened my photo gallery. I selected the 4 PDF documents and the screenshot of the insurance cancellation. I hit send on all of them simultaneously. My message landed in the chat like a hand grenade on a dinner table. It read exactly as follows. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for interrupting the cake discussions, but since I am suddenly the main topic of financial concern for this wedding, I thought it was time to clarify a few things. For the past 2 months, my mother has been telling you all that I had a minor stomach bug, that I demanded privacy, and that I aggressively pushed my family away. She told you I was fine. I want to be incredibly clear. Every single word of that was a calculated, malicious lie designed to cover up her own neglect. I did not have a stomach bug. My appendix ruptured. I contracted severe sepsis. I had to undergo 2 major emergency surgeries. I spent 31 days in the hospital fighting for my life. I was on a ventilator. I was fed through a tube. During those 31 days, not a single member of my immediate family came to see me. Not once. While they were posting pictures of wine tastings and dress fittings, I was lying in a hospital bed completely alone, terrified that I was going to die. I never asked for privacy. I begged them to come. They ignored me because it was inconvenient for their wedding planning schedule. Attached to this message is my hospital admission form proving the severity of my condition. Attached is the surgical report. Also attached is my hospital bill for $85,000, which I am paying myself. And finally, Attached is a screenshot proving that on the exact day I was undergoing my second, life-threatening surgery, my mother Cressida called my supplemental health insurance provider and canceled my policy to pocket a minor refund check, leaving me entirely exposed to crippling medical debt. Yesterday, after 31 days of complete silence, my mother texted me. She did not ask if I was alive. She demanded I give her $25,000 to pay for Sloane's designer dress and an orchid ceiling installation. She demanded I fund a luxurious lifestyle that does not exist. Let me be clear to everyone in this chat, especially to Orson's family, my parents are drowning in debt. They are begging me for money to maintain a fake image of wealth. I sent my mother exactly 1 penny. Because 1 penny is exactly the amount of worth this family places on my life. I will not be attending the wedding. I will not be funding this delusion. Do not ever contact me again. Have a wonderful life. The images of the documents finished uploading, sitting menacingly right beneath my text. The stark black and white of the hospital logos. The terrifying medical jargon. The undeniable $85,000 total. The insurance cancellation timestamp. I stared at the screen. I could see the little red receipts popping up like tiny explosions at the bottom of the chat. 3 people read it. Then 10. Then 25. I saw my mother's name appear at the bottom with the little typing indicator. Cressida is typing. The indicator vanished. She stopped typing. Aunt Maura is typing. The indicator vanished. I did not stick around to read the excuses. I did not want to see their panicked backpedaling. I had delivered the absolute, irrefutable truth, backed by hard data. My job here was done. I tapped the settings icon in the top right corner of the chat. I scrolled down to the very bottom of the menu. I pressed the bright red button that said Leave Group. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure? I smiled. A genuine, unburdened smile. I pressed yes. The chat vanished from my screen. I closed the app, locked my phone, and tossed it onto the sofa cushion. I walked into the kitchen where Hayes was finishing up making dinner. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the air, completely replacing the sterile scent of the hospital that had haunted my memory for weeks. It is done, I said softly, leaning against the kitchen counter. Hayes turned around, holding a wooden spoon. He looked at my face, searching for regret or sadness. He found neither. He smiled, walked over, and kissed my forehead. Good, he said. Now let's eat. We sat at the table and ate our dinner in absolute peace. The silence in my apartment was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of abandonment. It was the light, airy silence of freedom. For the first 20 minutes, my phone remained completely still. It was the calm before the hurricane. And then, exactly 22 minutes after I dropped the bomb, the peace was shattered. It was not my phone that went off. It was my apartment buzzer. The loud, abrasive sound echoed through the living room. Someone was downstairs at the main security door, pressing the button repeatedly, frantically, as if their life depended on it. I looked at Hayes. The war had arrived at my doorstep. Hayes stood up immediately, his posture shifting into something defensive and protective. I waved him down. I got this, I said. I walked over to the intercom by the front door and pressed the video feed button. The small, grainy screen flickered to life. I expected to see my mother, red-faced and screaming, or my father demanding I let him in to fix the mess. But it was neither of them. It was my cousin, Blythe. She was standing in the freezing lobby, not wearing a coat, her hair messy, looking like she had sprinted directly from her car to my building. She was clutching her phone to her chest with both hands. I pressed the unlock button and buzzed her in. A minute later, she was banging on my apartment door. I opened it, and she basically collapsed into the hallway, gasping for air. Marin, Blythe panted, leaning against the wall. Marin, you have absolutely no idea what you just did. It is a bloodbath. An absolute, catastrophic bloodbath. She held out her phone. Her hand was shaking. I took it and looked at the screen. She had the group chat open. The aftermath of my message was laid out in hundreds of frantic, chaotic texts. I scrolled up to the moment immediately after I left the group. The silence in the chat had lasted for a full 4 minutes. For minutes of 38 people reading my medical records, processing the sheer horror of the insurance cancellation, and digesting the revelation of my parents' fake wealth. The first person to break the silence was Uncle Declan. Declan was Evander's older brother, a retired judge, and the strict moral compass of the extended family. He was a wealthy man who did not tolerate nonsense, and he had been extremely generous with his money regarding family events. Declan wrote, "Evander, Cressida, is this true? Tell me right now that this girl is lying. Show me the proof that she is lying." Cressida had replied, her text riddled with typos, indicating pure panic. "Declan, please, it is not what it looks like." Marin is very confused. The medication she was on, it made her paranoid. The insurance thing was a clerical error. We love her. She is just trying to ruin Sloane's day because she is jealous. Declan was not a fool. A clerical error? He fired back. A clerical error that resulted in a refund check to your personal account on the exact day your daughter was having emergency surgery? You think I cannot read a medical bill, Cressida? I spent 40 years reading evidence. This is undeniable proof of absolute moral bankruptcy. Then came the hammer drop. Declan's next message was typed in cold, formal language. I had promised to write a $10,000 check next week to cover the catering and the open bar for this wedding. Consider that offer permanently revoked. I will not contribute a single dime to a family that leaves their child to die and then begs her for luxury decorations. Do not call my house. I read Declan's message and let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The truth was finally working for me instead of against me. But the real devastation was yet to come. I scrolled down further. Aunt Maura, the ultimate flying monkey who had screamed at me for sending the 1 penny, suddenly changed her tune. "Oh my God, Marin, I had no idea. Your mother told me you were at a spa retreat getting over a stomach bug. Cressida, how could you lie to me like this? I am so disgusted." The chat devolved into absolute chaos. Relatives were piling on, expressing horror, demanding answers, and pulling out of wedding responsibilities. Cousins who had offered to help with decorations suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The beautiful, unified facade of the wealthy, perfect family was tearing apart at the seams. But the most powerful message in the entire chat was not a long paragraph. It was a system notification. Just a few lines down from Uncle Declan's angry withdrawal of funds, there was a tiny gray box. "Helen, Orson's mother, has left the chat." No screaming. No demands for an explanation. Just a quiet, dignified, and utterly devastating exit. She read the proof that her future in-laws were broke, manipulative liars who abused their own daughter, and she simply walked away from the conversation. It was the ultimate social execution for someone like my mother. Blythe was watching my face as I read. "Aunt Cressida has been calling my phone nonstop for the last 20 minutes, Blythe said, pulling her coat tighter around herself. "She thinks because I live close to you, I can somehow fix this." She is hysterical. Uncle Evander is screaming in the background. They are completely melting down. Suddenly, my own phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I walked over and picked it up. The caller ID was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was from the wealthy suburb where Orson's parents lived. I let it ring, assuming it was a relative using a different phone to bypass my block list. It went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, my phone pinged with a voicemail notification. I put it on speaker and hit play. It was Sloane. She sounded absolutely deranged. She was not crying, she was hyperventilating with pure, unfiltered rage. "Marin, you psychotic witch." Sloane screamed into the phone. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Helen just called Orson. She canceled the joint credit card she gave us for the honeymoon. She told Orson to come over to their house right now for a serious family meeting. You have to call them. You have to call Helen right now and tell her you faked those documents. Tell her it was a prank. If Orson leaves me because they think we are poor, I swear to God, Marin, I will destroy your life. Call her right now." The voicemail ended with a sharp click. I looked at Hayes. He was shaking his head in disbelief. "Even now," Hayes muttered. "Even after seeing the hospital bills, seeing the proof of what you went through, her only concern is the honeymoon credit card. Exactly, I said, deleting the voicemail. They will never change. And I will never apologize for telling the truth. I thanked Blythe for coming over and checking on me. I sent her home with the rest of the chicken soup, assuring her that I was perfectly fine and incredibly safe. I locked my door, turned off my phone, and went to sleep. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, wrapped in the warmth of a clear conscience. The next morning, it was back to reality. It was Monday. I had a life to live and a career to manage. I woke up, dressed in a sharp, tailored corporate suit, grabbed my briefcase, and headed to the commercial real estate office. I felt powerful. I felt untouchable. I arrived at my office building, grabbed a coffee from the lobby cafe, and stepped into the elevator. As I walked onto my floor, the front desk receptionist, a sweet older woman named Carol, flagged me down. "Good morning, Marin," Carol said, looking slightly concerned. "There is a gentleman waiting for you in the guest lounge. He has been here since 7:30 this morning. He says it is a personal family matter." I frowned. A family matter? I had blocked everyone. I walked around the reception desk and peered into the glass-walled guest lounge. Sitting on the edge of a leather sofa, looking like he had not slept in 3 days, was Orson, my sister's wealthy, supposedly perfect fiancé. His designer suit was wrinkled, his tie was loose, and he was staring blankly at a cold cup of coffee in his hands. The final reckoning had arrived. I walked into the guest lounge and closed the glass door behind me. The click of the latch made Orson look up. His eyes were bloodshot, and the usual confident, arrogant aura he carried at family gatherings was completely gone. He looked entirely deflated. "Marin," he said, his voice hoarse. He stood up awkwardly, not quite knowing what to do with his hands. "I am sorry to show up at your workplace. I didn't know how else to reach you. Sloan told me you blocked everyone." I set my briefcase on the coffee table and sat down in the armchair opposite him. I crossed my legs and looked at him calmly. "What do you want, Orson? If you are here to ask me to tell your mother I forged medical documents so Sloan can keep her flower ceiling, you can leave right now." Orson winced. He rubbed his face with both hands, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. "No. God, no. That is not why I am here." He sat back down heavily. It was the worst night of my life," he began. "My mother called me. She forwarded me the screenshots of everything you put in that group chat. The hospital bills. The insurance cancellation. Everything. She demanded I come to the family estate immediately." I remained silent, letting him speak. I was not going to offer him comfort. He was marrying into the nightmare. He needed to understand the reality of it. I confronted Sloan when I got back to our apartment, Orson continued, staring at the floor. "I asked her if it was true. I asked her if she really left you in a hospital for a month while she was planning a party with my money. Do you know what she said, Marin?" "I can guess," I replied dryly. "She said I was exaggerating. She said I was trying to ruin her happiness." Orson looked up at me, a flash of genuine disgust in his eyes. "Exactly. She didn't deny it. She just justified it. She screamed at me for caring more about your drama than her wedding day. And then I asked her about the $25,000. I asked her why she was begging you for money when she told me your parents were multimillionaires who were proudly funding the event. The truth always comes out, Orson." I told him quietly. "The real estate empire, the trust funds, it is all smoke and mirrors. My parents are drowning in credit card debt to keep up appearances for people like you. I am the only one in that family who actually works for a living, and to them, I am just an emergency fund they can abuse and discard." Orson leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked broken. "I loved her, Marin. I really did. I didn't care if her family was rich or poor. I have my own money. I just wanted someone who loved me. But the deceit, the sheer, calculated cruelty of leaving your own sister to die and then stealing her insurance money? I looked at Sloan last night, screaming about her ruined reputation, and I realized I was looking at a monster. I don't even know who she is." "So, what are you going to do?" I asked, genuinely curious. The power dynamic had completely shifted. The golden child's perfect world was resting entirely in the hands of this exhausted man sitting across from me. Orson sat up straight. His expression hardened into something very cold and very resolute. I am canceling the grand wedding. All of it. The country club venue, the imported flowers, the designer dress, the 200 guests. It is all gone. I called the planners at 6 a.m. this morning and pulled the plug. I raised my eyebrows. I admit, I was slightly impressed. And Sloane? She went absolutely ballistic, Orson said, a humorless chuckle escaping his lips. She threw a vase at the wall. But I gave her an ultimatum. I told her the only way I am marrying her is if she signs an ironclad, brutal prenuptial agreement that protects every single asset my family owns. No spousal support, no access to my trust. And the wedding will be a 10-minute ceremony at the local courthouse with just our parents. No parties. No dresses. No showing off. A courthouse wedding. For Sloane, the girl who demanded a $25,000 floral ceiling, a quiet courthouse wedding was a fate worse than death. It was social humiliation on an epic scale. If she really loves me, she will sign it and marry me in a courthouse, Orson said, though his voice sounded hollow, like he already knew the answer. But if she refuses, then it is over. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked at me, a deep sense of shame washing over his features. I am so sorry, Marin. I am sorry for what they did to you. I was blind. I let Sloane paint you as the villain, and I never bothered to ask for your side of the story. I hope you can find some peace now. I stood up and offered him a polite, professional nod. Thank you, Orson. Good luck with the prenuptial agreement. You are going to need it. I watched him walk out of the glass lounge, a man heading back to a war zone he created for himself. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and started my workday. I appraised 3 commercial properties, finalized a major financial report, and had lunch with a colleague. I felt lighter than air. When I finally checked my personal phone at 5 p.m., I had 7 new voicemails in my blocked messages folder. They were all from my mother. I put my headphones in, sat back in my ergonomic chair, and listened to the destruction of her empire. The first voicemail was frantic, demanding I fix what I broke. The third voicemail was angry, accusing me of destroying the family name. But the seventh voicemail was pure, unfiltered despair. Marin, please, Cressida sobbed into the phone. Her voice was raspy, broken, stripped of all its usual arrogant polish. Orson canceled the wedding. He canceled the venue. He is demanding a prenup. Sloane has been locked in her room crying for 10 hours. Declan refuses to speak to us. Maura told the entire country club what happened, and now none of the ladies will return my calls. We are ruined, Marin. We have massive loans out for deposits we cannot get back. Please, sweetie, please call Orson's mother. Please tell her we will pay her back. Please tell her you forgive us. Marin, you are our family. You have to save us. Please pick up the phone. The voicemail ended. I sat in my quiet, sunlit office. I looked out the massive glass window at the sprawling city skyline below me. I held the phone in my hand, staring at the screen. The woman who hung up on me while I was bleeding in an ambulance was now begging me to save her from social ruin. The woman who stole my insurance money was asking for financial grace. All I had to do was press the green call button. I could call her back. I could offer them a lifeline. I could be the bigger person, just like Evander always told me to be. I could step right back into my role as the invisible foundation and let them walk all over me again. I moved my thumb over the screen. And I made my final choice. I hovered my thumb over the callback button for perhaps 3 seconds. I thought about the concept of forgiveness. Society places a massive burden on victims to forgive their abusers, especially when those abusers share your blood. We are told that holding on to anger is toxic, that being the bigger person is the only path to peace. But as I sat there, listening to the echo of my mother's sobbing voicemail in my mind, I realized something profound. Forgiveness is a gift you give to someone who has acknowledged their wrongdoing, felt genuine remorse, and changed their behavior. My mother was not apologizing for abandoning me in a hospital. She was apologizing because she got caught. She was crying because her country club friends were ignoring her and her fake wealth was exposed. If I called her back, I would not be offering forgiveness. I would be offering permission. Permission to continue treating me like garbage. I moved my thumb half an inch to the right. I pressed the bright red delete icon. The voicemail vanished. The blocked folder was empty. I locked my phone and slid it into my purse. I did not call her back. I did not text her. There would be no grand reconciliation. There would be no tearful family hug where we all learned a valuable lesson. Instead, I gave them exactly what they had given me for 31 agonizing days in that hospital. Absolute, suffocating, unbroken silence. But there was a critical difference. The silence they forced on me was designed to break me. The silence I chose to enforce was designed to protect me. And in that silence, I finally found my peace. It has been 8 months since the day I dropped the bomb in the family group chat. The fallout was spectacular, and the dust has finally settled into a new, permanent reality. Sloan and Orson did not have a massive, luxury wedding. After weeks of screaming matches, Orson stood his ground. Sloan, terrified of losing her meal ticket and having to actually get a job, tearfully signed the brutal prenuptial agreement. They got married on a rainy Tuesday afternoon at the county courthouse. There was no floral ceiling. There was no designer dress. Just a sterile courtroom and a 10-minute ceremony. From what Blythe tells me, Orson's parents did not even attend. They sent a polite congratulatory card and a blender. Sloan's dream of being a wealthy socialite died in that courtroom, replaced by the reality of a husband who no longer trusts a word she says. As for my parents, their house of cards collapsed entirely. With Uncle Declan pulling his funding and Orson refusing to bail them out, the massive loans they took out for the canceled wedding deposits defaulted. They were forced to downsize, selling the beautiful suburban home they used to host their fake wine tasting parties. They moved into a small, modest condo on the other side of town. Cressida was quietly asked to resign from the country club board after Aunt Maura loudly recounted the insurance cancellation story at a charity luncheon. The social exile my mother feared more than death became her daily reality. I have not spoken to Evander, Cressida, or Sloan since the day I sent that penny. I intend to keep it that way for the rest of my life. My life, on the other hand, flourished in the absence of their toxic weight. I threw myself into my career with renewed energy, no longer burdened by the constant anxiety of my family's demands. 3 months ago, I received a massive promotion at the corporate appraisal firm. With the substantial raise, I finally did something for myself. I bought my first house. It is not a massive mansion, but it is a beautiful, historic craftsman home with a large, sunlit garden in the back. Last weekend, I invited the people who actually matter over to help me paint the living room. Hayes was there, covered in blue paint, laughing as he tried to roll the ceiling. Blythe was there, sitting on a ladder, playing music from her phone. And sitting at the kitchen island, eating a slice of pizza, was Uncle Declan. He had reached out to me shortly after the group chat incident, apologizing for being blind to my parents' behavior for so long. We have started building a genuine relationship based on mutual respect. As I stood in the middle of my new living room, holding a paintbrush and watching the people who loved me laugh and share food, I thought back to that terrifying Tuesday in the empty parking lot. I thought about the pain, the sepsis, and the crushing loneliness of that hospital room. I used to look at that memory as the darkest point in my life. But standing in my new home, surrounded by my chosen family, I realized it was actually the brightest. That hospital bed was the crucible that burned away the illusions I had been clinging to. It taught me the most painful, but most necessary lesson a person can learn. Blood makes you related, but loyalty, respect, and showing up when things are terrifying, that is what makes you family. The best revenge in life is not screaming. It is not destroying someone's property or plotting an elaborate downfall. The best, most devastating revenge is simply removing your energy from toxic people, letting the undeniable truth do the heavy lifting, and going on to live an incredibly happy, successful life without them. They wanted a $25,000 wedding. They got a 1-penny reality check. And I got my freedom. So, Here's the question I want to leave you with, because I see this debate happening all the time. There are people out there, even some extended relatives who heard the story, who still say I went too far. They say that exposing my parents' financial ruin to Orson's family was petty. They argue that because Sloane was my sister, I should have just ignored the text message instead of actively destroying her wedding and humiliating my mother. They believe that family secrets should stay within the family, no matter how toxic the behavior gets. But then there are those who understand that protecting abusers only enables them to ruin more lives. What do you think? Was sending that one penny and dropping the receipts in the group chat a step too far? Was I too cruel for ruining my sister's wedding over past grievances? Or was it exactly the consequence they earned after 31 days of abandonment? If you were in my shoes, holding those medical bills, would you have protected their secret, or would you have burned the facade to the ground just like I did? Let me know your honest opinion in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you have ever had to learn the hard way who actually shows up for you when the world goes dark, you already know exactly where this story lives. This has been Valerie Payback. New stories of righteous karma and standing your ground drop every single day. Do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next one.